Hi everybody, welcome back to our next episode of TSSA Talks. As you can tell today, we are sad not to be at the Exit Inn. They are our great partner with this video series, our interview series about social justice. We love the folks over at Exit Inn. We really appreciate how seriously they are taking this pandemic, and due to the increase of cases here in the Middle Tennessee area, they've decided to not do any events with multiple people from their space until early next year. So we were very respectful of that. We're so thankful for their partnership in this endeavor. And so big shout out and thanks to the folks at Exit Inn. We're here in the offices at Tennessee State Soccer Association today instead of the Exit Inn, but we're really excited to be able to bring you another one of the conversations as a part of this TSSA Talk series. I'm pleased to be joined today by JJ Greer. JJ, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
From Memphis, we've got JJ. He's an alum of the University of Memphis, played soccer there, had a great career as a player and a student athlete all around. Has now gone on to be a professional player after that. He is currently a commentator for the 901 FC games, and he works for the Department of Memphis Tourism as a sales manager for sports and events with the Memphis Sports Council. So that's a mouthful, JJ.
Yeah.
Quite a job for such a young man. But thank you so much for being here. We really want to try and, as a part of this series, shine a light on some underrepresented communities in our game. We know there are a lot of underrepresented communities, be it based on socioeconomic status, based on religion. One of those is race, though. And we feel like in the context of what's been going on in our country, that's where we started our video series, and we want to make sure that we're hearing from people of color to be able to tell us about how the game has been a positive influence on their game. Maybe if there are some things that were hard or difficult, we want to also be honest about those things and really just allow you to tell your story to hopefully spur some conversations from people out there who are watching this. So thank you so much for joining us. And I guess we all have in common that we have a love for soccer. Can you give us a little bit in the background on how you fell in love with soccer, how it became a part of your life?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here, coming up the road from Memphis, here to Nashville, and it was good to speak with Hans for a minute and break bread with you and Hillary. So, thank you so much for having me. And
it's our pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, and for bringing this, subject to light, or, kind of, keeping the movement and the topic going. So I'm always happy to do that. But my first love of soccer came from my sister playing. So my older sister, Mackenzie Nash, now I always want to say Mackenzie Greer. It's my last name. She's married now. Shout out to my brother-in-law, Karen, too. He's a great guy. So my love of soccer came from watching her play. She's 4 or 5 years older than me, on the off year, and they had a great team. She grew up playing for Fury, which is now combined, I believe, to I think it moved back to Memphis Football Club. It was Mid-South Football Club. You know how that goes.
We've got that all over the state.
Yeah, exactly. You know how that
names and letters and acronyms for sure.
Absolutely. So you get to deal with that, right? I grew up watching them play from the sidelines and just kind of wanting to be like them and how they played, and they were really good. They would win state championships all the time, and my dad, he's crazy. He'd be on the sidelines running around, jumping and cheering. Just a crazy guy all around. And then so watching her, and honestly watching the U.S. women's national team. I still remember watching when they beat China in the final. Was that what year was that?
99?
99?
I think.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be crucified now.
Oh my gosh, I know. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
We're putting each other on the spot.
The first women's World Cup that we won.
Yeah.
Was in China. Yeah. And they beat China in the final.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I was hooked from the beginning. Just from watching them play and being young, and that's how I got introduced.
So you're 3, 4, 5 years old, a really small kid, going to the field, starting out just to watch your sister play, and then as soon as you're old enough to play, and my first experience playing, we lived in Collierville for a short time, so
nice.
I started out in. There was a 7 and it was the third number on that. So 1970 something.
There you go.
Playing there in Memphis. So you then go out at 5, 6 years old and start playing yourself? Is that roughly right?
4 years old.
Wow, okay.
So I started playing at 4, YMCA.
Yeah.
So I mean, it wasn't a huge level by any means, but I guess that's when started playing organized somewhat soccer.
But still playing at home with your sister. And
of course, yeah, playing running around with them. They'd knock me down and getting up, and so I'd been playing, unorganized with them
Sure.
and just around the house, breaking things and stuff like that.
So one of the things that's been a common topic as we talk to folks is playing multiple sports. So
Yeah.
sports specialization. That's something that is a big topic across soccer, not just in our country, but specifically in our country. Were there other sports that you played growing up?
Yeah, of course. I played basketball all the way up until 8th grade, actually. And I played that sport, that was right there with soccer until 8th grade. So I played, at a fairly high level with soccer and then a fairly high level with basketball, AAU, up until 8th grade.
So even outside of the school season, you're playing additionally with AAU circuit. So you're playing two sports at a very competitive level through like 12, 13.
Yep, exactly. And then, a little bit of baseball sprinkled in there, machine pitch like 1st and 2nd grade, but, I was too, ADD or whatever. Baseball was not, for me at the time. Those guys have a lot of focus. I needed to move at all times. I needed movement.
Your parents probably sought that out to keep you sleeping a little bit better, and behaving a little bit
as well as my teachers in school. So just movement. I just needed to constantly move. So
and basketball's a great sport for that. I mean, it's funny that the basketball court would fit inside one of our 18-yard boxes.
That's crazy. Wow.
But the games are very different in some ways, but very similar. Did you find some of the things, be it skills, the strategy, the plays of basketball would translate to soccer and vice versa? How did you find playing those two sports?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, they're both free-flowing by nature. Basketball, you might say, is a little bit more structured with the plays and things of that nature. It might be a little more stop-start, but they're still free-flowing. There's creativity involved. The angles and the just the kind of the movement, how you can have that sauce, if you will, crossing somebody over, doing a nice step over, things of that nature, definitely correlate. And I used to love all that stuff. And then defense as well, sliding and moving your feet. And that actually helped later on in my career when I became a defender. I learned a lot of those basketball skills. So, no, there's definitely a lot of correlation.
So it's a sports household you grew up. So clearly sports was a part of your life growing up. Through your sister, you mentioned your dad being on the sidelines.
Yeah.
That was an influence for you. So as you grew up, you went from playing at a recreational level. When was the time when you started to play soccer more seriously?
Yeah, so it started, I think 8 years old, 7, 8 years old is when I started playing for Fury in Germantown, which is a suburb of Memphis. I think that it was either 7 or 8 years old is when, we kind of switched over into the more, competitive games where we would play, kind of travel regionally, not super far, but, maybe travel an hour and a half away to play teams, and they would come in and play us at Mike Rose. So that's when I think around 8 years old is when I started.
Were there memories, and you're from a generation sort of just beyond when Memphis had professional soccer previously. We're excited Memphis has professional soccer again. As we mentioned, JJ's one of the commentators for the 901 FC. So you weren't born by the time that league had kind of folded, but some of those guys that had played in those leagues had stayed in Memphis, had fallen in love with Memphis and Tennessee, and had sort of helped to grow the soccer culture there. Were there former professionals there who impacted your game, or were there coaches that you came across that really played an important role in soccer continuing to be a part of your life?
Oh, of course. 100%. The coaches that I had as a youth, shaped my entire career, right? They kind of molded my mind and taught me how to play. And Tony Carpignani was one of those. And Tony's, of course, is a legend, locally and throughout the state and probably nationally. Well, actually, I know he is. He played for I think he played for the New York Cosmos back in the day.
He played for the Cosmos in the NASL.
Yeah. So, and I didn't know any of this, of course, when I was a kid. I didn't, what did that mean to me?
Right.
But, no, Tony was great. He coached me. You'll have to forgive me on the exact years, but it was a large part of my youth. And I know, he played in Memphis professionally and then stuck around and taught us. And I learned a lot from him.
Sure. Were there other coaches, be it in club level or at a school level, middle school or high school? Were there other coaches that were particularly impactful to you?
Yeah, of course. And I don't want to leave anybody out.
Sure.
I don't know if any. Tony was just the one I knew for sure played locally in Memphis professionally.
Sure.
But of course, Rogerio Lima, who was my. He started coaching me from a young age, club soccer as well. He might have been my first. Youth coach, right around that 8, 9 years old, like U10 kind of range. And then of course I played at Christian Brothers High School where he was the coach as well. Brazilian guy, and would let us have a lot of freedom with the ball, and I just loved that. That Brazilian flair. And then watching, and he was a great player too.
Sure.
A great left foot, and watching those Brazilian national teams, he just let us have a lot of freedom.
And Raj is one of those guys who you mentioned who came and played college soccer here. And again, another person who, whether it was professionals back in the day or then college players, and the University of Memphis obviously has a great tradition for a long time, who then would stay in the area. Raj is still working with one of our clubs here in Tennessee, and where we start to see the people who've really invested long term.
Of course.
You mentioned Tony. That's a name that goes back more than 30 years in Tennessee soccer. So Raj is another great one. So you got a chance to be coached by him both as a youth and then again through your high school career, which was a very successful career at Christian Brothers. What were a couple of highlights you still remember today from those days at Christian Brothers?
Oh man, those were great years. We actually made it to the state championship every year I was there, and unfortunately we lost the first three, but in the final. But we finally got it senior year, so it was one of those really super sweet, bittersweet moments, if you will. So those were great times, and we had a really good team, which is. It can be rare sometimes with high school soccer, because high school soccer you're playing with kind of the kids in the area, or it's not like club soccer, for instance. It's a little different. But we were blessed to have a very strong team. So and Raj was he was a great coach.
Yeah, there's a long tradition at Christian Brothers High School that goes on today. Coach Glazer is a mutual friend of ours who's doing a great job there. They also have been great with the facilities at Christian Brothers when we do some of our events for Tennessee State Soccer remotely. Everything's not done here in Middle Tennessee. We try and do some things in different parts of the state, and they're certainly very gracious there. But they have for many years made a commitment to soccer. It's been a big part of Christian Brothers High School, and the overall experience, I guess the educational part of that as well. How much of that was instilled in you, sort of growing up, how important the educational part was? Because as you're growing up, MLS is starting now, but professional soccer, they contracted down to as few as 10 teams. So it's kind of iffy what professional soccer would be. So how much of a part of wanting to someday be a pro, dreaming of being a pro, was a part of your thinking, but also how much was education important to you then?
Yeah, no, education was everything, and my mom made sure of that. Right, when I was younger, I wanted to play sports all the time, and I wanted to be a pro soccer player. But my mom, she and my dad, but mostly my mom was like, well, it's school first, right?
Right.
And so that was instilled from a very early age that without your education you can't. There's not. It's going to be very difficult. It could be very difficult. You can go your ceiling is much higher, right? If the further you can go and excel in your education. So in terms of professional soccer. When I was younger, it was all about the English Premier League at the time, the EPL. That's what was on TV, for us. And, my favorite color was blue, and I liked watching Chelsea. I think you took a dig at me earlier, Brian.
Mr. Abramovich came in with a lot of Russian oil money, spent a lot of money, and took that club. It was not a great club, and now they are a great club. And one of our great American hopes, Christian Pulisic's playing there now.
Full
We've got some other.
So you have to love them now.
I do. I absolutely turn on Chelsea games whenever they're on. But and I sort of grew up a Man U fan. Just because Ryan Giggs was about my age, that's real old. I loved watching that guy play as a young player. And so it is. What do you see on TV? What do you get a chance to connect with? And I have a ton of respect for what they've done at Chelsea. And so that was kind of the team that you would follow on a regular basis?
Oh, yeah. No, I loved them. And I loved all the black players that they had on the team. They had a ton of African guys on the team. Didier Drogba and Makaleli and Solomon Kalou and Johnny Mikel. And, the list goes on and on. Michael Essien. And these guys are the best in the world.
Right.
And, I'd watch them on TV. I was like, that could be me. You know what I mean? Like, I could play for Chelsea. Right. And then, of course, as I got older, it's like, well, maybe, I could play for Crystal Palace or something. Just because, and then, as you get older, you realize, like, oh, wait a second, that level is the best in the world. You don't realize that until you get older.
But
right?
I think there's something to that, though. You were able to look on TV and see those guys, and there were guys that looked like you.
Yeah.
There were guys who, played the game that you love, but also, and every team in England at that point wasn't tremendously integrated. There weren't, they weren't bringing in. You mentioned a couple of guys, Michael Essien and John Obi Mikel, who were from the African continent, and were now playing in England. They're stars for their national teams, but now they're playing for this team. And every team in the Premier League back then in the '90s, every team didn't look like that, and they're one of the ones that did. And perhaps that was a part of the gravitation towards it.
Oh, of course. No, I know it was, because I even remember that then. And my parents, we all watched it. We sat down together, and they didn't. When they were younger, they didn't grow up playing soccer. They just got involved with the game through my sister and me.
Right.
So it was kind of like a second act for them. But we would all love watching. Chelsea. Yeah.
All right. So we've gone through after 3 years of struggling and losing in the state finals.
Yeah.
Finally, senior year, breakthrough. Who'd you beat in the final?
We beat Father Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Coach Dietrich's a good buddy of mine. And, he's won enough.
Exactly,
enough.
right.
So you guys break through, win that championship to get Christian Brothers back on a winning track, and then your next step as a player and in school as well was to go to the University of Memphis. What was the decision like? How did you go about making your decision to attend the University of Memphis?
Yeah.
And then after that, we'll wrap up here for part one. Then we'll come back to part two to kind of go through your Memphis career and then on into your professional career. But how did you make the call to stay local?
Yeah.
I'm sure for every one of us as a 17 or 18-year-old guy trying to make that call, it's a difficult decision. How did your process go?
Yeah, no, it wasn't super difficult for me, the decision. And Coach Richie Grant was awesome, and I knew we would eventually get to, I would have mentioned him earlier, but I figured we would get to the college. But Coach Grant, he was another coach that coached me when I was young, U9 or, I kind of had Tony and Raj and Coach Richie Grant, and Paul Conway is another one that coached me younger, and I learned so much from all of them. But Coach Grant was another coach that coached me much earlier on, let's say, 10, 11 years old.
Is that in a club environment? Was that through ODP? Okay, so they're in Memphis. You get a chance to work with them.
Yeah, club and I think a little bit ODP. Definitely Paul Conway was ODP. But Richie was already coaching University of Memphis, so he was pretty busy.
Yeah.
But no, I believe we had a regional tournament for ODP in Texas. I think it was in Houston, and played pretty well there and scored a couple goals against some of the other state teams. South Carolina and Texas and North Texas, some good teams. I played well, and Coach Grant was there and offered me a scholarship, and that was, I think, my junior year, earlier on in my junior year, and I was really just kind of starting to really, think about college, right, and where I want to play, because I knew I always wanted to play. I knew I was going to play somewhere. I just had to figure out, how I was going to do it and who wanted me, and where I wanted to go. And I was always been a Memphis fan. My dad played football at Memphis. It was then Memphis State University, and my mom, she got her master's degree from Memphis, and my sister went to Memphis. And so we're always huge Memphis Tigers fans. Didn't go to a ton of the soccer games growing up. Went to football, basketball, more of the traditional sports. But I was always a big Memphis fan. Right. So I made the decision early. I think I committed my junior year to go to Memphis, and that was kind of a freeing thing. And I feel like I played lighter and was able to, I guess, take more freedoms in how I played, and it was great.
Terrific. Well, I mean, and again, great programs you've gotten a chance to be a part of, great coaches you've gotten a chance to interact with. I mean, of those guys, Paul Conway is still a member of the ODP region staff. He's on our state staff for ODP. Here at Tennessee Soccer, we're big Paul Conway fans. We're going to let that go to his head. But so some definitely really impactful things that have happened along the journeys from starting out watching your sister play now to getting ready to start your career at the University of Memphis. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about JJ's transition to now playing at the college level. That's a transition for everybody. This is the highest level, Division I men's soccer at a very powerful conference. So to talk about the transition from playing as a youth and a high school player to in college, and then from his college career into his professional career, you don't want to miss part two with JJ Greer. Come back for some more TSSA talks.